That's the issue, right? If the world feels like a big storm, how do you feel the ground? How do you, do you walk? Do you sit? Do you, I mean, it's not that complicated in some sense. But you have to return to the world, and that's partly what we're saying is there's a healthy balance between the retreat and the stepping forward, stepping back.
Welcome to this edition of Tiny Pulpit Talks. This is our little subversion we're talking about as from the minister's study. You have your three ministers with you, and one of the things I wanted to talk about and get your guys' take on and think about is we're in a tumultuous, if not really hard / catastrophic, feeling like really spinning out about things going on in the world, looking at an upcoming election and what could the fallout from that and conflict. And I can feel that in my body. I feel all the spinning, and it's hard for me sometimes to even open up the internet or turn on the TV, or I just, there's a little bit of, me needing to find peace too. And so the whole point of this podcast is for me to ask both of you what I should do. No, kidding.
Yeah, right.
But it brings up the question, what do we do in times where it's feeling like too much or we're overwhelmed? How do we care for ourselves? Like, what do you guys do for yourselves in these times? It's a tough question.
I think in times like this, there is often the tendency, and I have this tendency, to retreat or avoid the conflict or the mess.
Yeah.
Which is one strategy, but I think really the wise voice in my head actually says you need to be in community.
In community. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm doing something.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's not like gonna solve all the world's problems, do something.
Yeah.
Is that the extrovert's version of the answer to this question? Because
That's not an extrovert.
Aren't you not? You're not?
I'm a borderline introvert.
I am
extrovert.
Also, but I think I'm more and more introvert over my lifetime. Yeah. Because I actually think part of the self-care for me is retreat.
Mm-hmm.
And it is more time on my bicycle. It is, quiet time, because the noise is what creates dissonance for me.
Mm-hmm.
We are living in a divisive time, to say the least, right? There's even people we agree with on certain things feel, like we have divisive issues on other things. And so, we don't know where we stand. But for me, there is a lot of self-care in getting to being alone.
Well, and what you're describing as self-care, I think, is different from avoiding or disconnecting or, when I said retreat, I meant more avoiding and disconnecting.
Yeah, avoidance, okay. But I think actually avoidance is also not a bad thing.
Sure,
I turn off the news, like you said,
Yeah.
I'm not listening to the news all the time. I'm not
right.
NPR, the TV,
Yeah.
I
Scrolling.
cultivate the news very, very carefully.
Yes.
I just can't, because it's too much.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Yes, I get the difference between complete avoidance, especially if the conflict is with a person.
Sure.
The healing happens in the encounter, not in the retreat. But I think there's value in stepping back. I also, obviously, we're ministers of a church. We believe in the value of coming together as a community. We've been in the hope business for I don't know, a long time now.
Yeah.
125 years.
Well, not only that,
a lot of time before that too.
Especially over the last 12 years or whatever it is. And the answers aren't always easy, but the coming together as a group of people who care about one another is a big part of that answer, at least for us, right?
I think there's a little bit of that for me that's already, because that is baked in, because I know on Sunday we're going to have hundreds of people to be with and to be together, I find that balances, and that I'm going to be very engaged with all the people that we're seeing, because we know a lot of the hearts and the minds and the lives of the people that I'm going to see. It does mean that during the week I do spend probably maybe less time than I used to in my groups of friends. Even like I will spend more time out on a run, or like reading, or watching sports that I don't actually like to do with other people, because they don't watch sports right. And so I have noticed.
Do we have to ask you about that?
No,
Oh, okay.
that's a separate.
Yeah.
There's a separate thing. But I have found that in the last few years is that because of the enormity and the beauty and the sort of shape of community through the weekend, during the week I find myself a little bit more in the solitary phase. And I've found lately that intentionally reading fiction has been helping tremendously.
Has for me too,
Yes, me too.
I think there's something about the care of the weaving of the story and the involving myself in a really kind of a empathic or compassionate way with something that is in a way isn't real, like in a physical sense, doesn't have any stake. I have found that has really helped me sleep, and it has also helped me kind of sort thoughts. So yeah, I was talking to a friend yesterday who's also really been able to, in the midst of this, up his meditation practice, to find a piece of every morning for 20 minutes or so, and has been really growing in that area.
Yeah, all good, healthy habits help center us and ground us.
Yeah.
That's the issue, right? If the world feels like a big storm, how do you feel the ground? How do you, do you walk? Do you sit? Do you, I mean, it's not that complicated in some sense, but you have to return to the world, and that's partly what we're saying is there's a healthy balance between the retreat and the stepping forward, stepping back in the chaos.
Yeah.
And of course, we're not talking exactly about personal chaos,
right?
Which is harder to manage in this way. We're talking about sort of global chaos.
But that's actually, it's a really good point, because as we know, as people who meet with our congregants and people struggling, is that I have a real place in my heart for people who are already holding everything happening in the world, and then their legs get taken out when something personal and even closer to them also happens. That can be a tremendous weight in this time.
Yeah, and people, we and the people watching this need to find the resources to help them in whatever situation, if it's abuse or if it's, ideation about suicide, you have to find the right sources. You have to call the hotline, you have to call a therapist, you have to call the police, whatever it is, because that at least can break some of that chaos. We're not dealing with those kinds of things personally right now, but we do encounter a lot of people in the church who are going through those kinds of things.
And we help to connect people with those resources that are available.
Yeah. I mean, that's another thing for people watching to know is that we literally on our phones and in our midst, the three of us and others have number of resources and ways that we can help when something emergent is happening, something that's feeling you're overwhelmed. Like there's an entire group of people who are trained in both in our hearts, and then we know people who are trained professionally to help. And I think sometimes there is a feeling, I don't feel it that much at this church. Help is very important and people are pro help here. But in a lot of America, there's the pull yourself up by the bootstraps. I can handle this. I've got this. I mean, we have met with the mayor of University Park, and we've heard from representatives at Highland Park Schools that there can be this veneer of everything's okay, I'm holding it together, until you can't. And that is one of the things at this kind of time to be really cautious of.
Yeah. And what we know from trauma experiences is that telling the story over and over is a way you get to healing. So whether it's a watching the news thing or it's a personal attack or something, being able to find people who you can trust and are confidants in hearing your story, just hearing it.
Absolutely.
Is a healing aspect of our lives which is kind of, in a sense, goes back to the fiction reading, which is maybe how instructive that is to us, is that the act of storytelling is a healing act.
Yeah.
Whether it's I got robbed and this is what happened, and I tell that, if it's proven, like you tell it 10 times, it lessens the effect, the trigger effect later, right? Those kinds of things. But we're also taught in American culture that stiff upper lip thing that probably came from England or somewhere, which is don't talk about bad things that happen. That's not the family I grew up in. I grew up in like you just tell everything. So like, but many people I think grew up in families where it was just like we don't talk about those things.
Yeah,
and that's not the way to go at difficult times and experiences, right?
I mean, silence about hard things. There's the whole. Well, there's the slogan that's been used in a number of movements about science. Silence is deadly.
Yeah.
I mean, it really can be harmful.
Yeah.
When we don't speak about these hard things in our lives.
Yeah, and you both raised something really important about finding this narrative, finding this thread, and telling the story. Like, I've read so many things and seen so many things throughout all cultures that sometimes at the center of many smaller communities are that community's storyteller, because telling the stories of a community, inviting other people to tell their stories. I think before we're even talking about it now, there are many cultures that their entire social being and construct comes out of telling stories and hearing other people's stories. And in addition to telling them is also writing them. There's a lot of research that says when you sit and you really write them out and write the story, it's people access a different part of their brain or their other part of their feelings. I'm not a psychologist, but and that can also be.
You just play one on TV.
I just play one on TV. That's why I have these elbow pads here. So yeah, that's another really important aspect.
Yeah, journaling.
Yeah,
we call that
journaling as a spiritual practice. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I've been doing some writing in the morning lately.
Yeah, I haven't been doing that for a long time. The
Yeah.
computer took over the journaling.
Yeah.
But I think, maybe during my sabbatical I'll get back to it because I'll be in places that sort of encourage that kind of slower thinking.
Yeah, I don't know what made me do it. I think because we had an all-staff retreat and I got I stole an extra notebook and I just had this perfectly pristine notebook and I put it on
Take it out of your paycheck.
Yeah, just take it out. Just dock me, yeah. And it was so beautiful and I just kind of opened it and started writing in it. It's you never know what it's going to be.
Yeah, that's
And
awesome.
so it's a little bit of, I'd say in these times, maybe it is opening our minds and opening our hearts to ways we might not have explored before either, because that can be a barrier to spiritual progress or growth is, oh, well, I tried that before and it didn't work. Okay, we'll try something else. And if you need ideas about that, we're here. Like, we've got all kinds of ways to give you assignments. No, just kidding.
Did we miss anything on this conversation?
No, I think this is good. I'm sure there's other things, but we want to hear from you. If you've got questions, we hope, and certainly if you've got...
what helps you.
Exactly. That would be great. If you can put in the comments, we'd love to see, oh, you know what, I tried this meditation or I tried that, and put those in and share them with people, because I think this is a really good conversation to be having right now.
Yeah.
So thanks for tuning in on this important discussion. We're so grateful that you did. And, like I said, leave comments, leave questions, send us some reviews on your podcasts, and we'll see you on Sunday. Thanks for coming to Tiny Pulpit Talks in this special time. Have a good day. Bye.
Thanks.